Welcome back into the Morning Rush. Want to go to the phone lines and welcome in Mike Golic Jr. of ESPN Radio. Mike, I was going to say Golic and Wingo, but man, you got a new show coming up.
Yeah, no, Chene and Golic Jr. is going to be a good time. It is a total lifestyle change for me. I go from doing a morning show, waking up at 4:30 Eastern every day and hanging out with my dad and Trey Wingo, who were awesome, and getting to do a show with my dad was a dream come true. I'll never top that. But now going into the afternoon, getting to sleep in, and doing a show with someone who age-wise is a peer of mine is going to be a huge change for me, and certainly one that's exciting in a lot of ways.
You wake up about the same time I do. I got an alarm set for 4:20. I'm out of bed by 4:30. The adjustment. I know my sleep schedule on weekends, man, I can't sleep past 6 or 7. What do you think that adjustment is going to be like for your sleep schedule coming up?
You know what? It's going to be welcome. Like at this point at 30, I keep telling myself, Dad for 22 years had his alarm go off at that same time. And while he's right, you never fully get used to it. For him, that it becomes so ingrained in his lifestyle at that point. For me, that alarm's been going off like that, and sometimes even earlier for the last 5 years. And so I feel like I hopefully have time to break the habit and maybe start having, somewhat normal human hours in all this. But every day I've been off since the end of the show, I've still probably been up at 6:30 or 7 o'clock at the latest. And hell, I mean, like you said, based off our shared alarm, that feels like sleeping in already.
Talking with Mike Golic Jr. here of ESPN Radio. Mike, I know Arkansas fans were really excited about the potential to go to South Bend this upcoming season. Unfortunately, because of the coronavirus, it's not going to happen. Tell us about what a game day atmosphere is like in South Bend, Indiana.
It really is incredible, and we had the good fortune of getting to talk to Hunter Yurachek on Golic and Wingo a few times, and I think between him and Jack Swarbrick, there's enough shared desire to make this happen for everyone involved. I mean, it's why you put it on the schedule to begin with, and so for Notre Dame and Arkansas, two very well-known brands around college football, to get to do this would be awesome. South Bend is great because it's different, and I think it's really improved even since the stadium renovations happened. Obviously, you've got all of the history and prestige around campus. I always tell people to hit the main landmarks, go to the Dome, go to the Basilica, go to the Grotto, because that's exactly where I go back there. I had buddies who would come up and play on other teams who would always say, if you're not careful, you can hear the ghosts. And a lot of people and a lot of coaches will warn their players about that coming up, because you don't want to let the folklore, you don't want to let all the history be the thing that distracts you from going up there and trying to play a football game. But as a fan, to get to take all that in, and now with what they've done in the stadium, the Jumbotron, the game day atmosphere that's helped curate, it's all turned it into something that holds on to the tradition of Notre Dame while providing that modern atmosphere. Looking at the stadium itself is kind of a great example of that, because from the outside, they always made sure from the outside of the stadium that you can see through to the original brick stadium on the inside before the renovation that took place in the 90s and before the renovation that took place now. So you can always have a direct line of sight to the literal house that Rockne built.
You were talking about with Jack Swarbrick, the Notre Dame athletic director, and Hunter Yurachek, the Arkansas athletic director, when hopefully we eventually make our way up north, up to Indiana. I've been told Rocco's, I've been told the linebacker. Where do I have to go that weekend to go eat or drink?
Yeah, I think those are going to be two of the heavy hitters right there, certainly. The linebacker is sort of the bar of choice for all Notre Dame alumni. If you're looking for maybe some of the student experience, CJ's and Finney's might offer you that downtown, but I would say the linebacker is tried and true. It is Notre Dame Americana and all that. Rocco's is the pizza of choice around that area, certainly. I would also say, like, right in that same vein, O'Rourke's is right next to campus, and it's a little bit newer, but it's an Irish pub, and it's done a really good job of becoming a real staple of the game day atmosphere around Notre Dame and in the time leading up to that one, though. So I would say all of those, you really can't go wrong in that area. Legends on campus might have a sandwich on the menu named after the Golic family, so I'm always willing to publicly endorse that one. But there really are some nice spots there, and they've made a lot of them within walking distance to campus, which is awesome, or stumbling if you're going to the linebacker.
Mike Golic Jr., ESPN Radio, with us on the Morning Rush. Mike, there is a lot of different experiences that you can take in a Notre Dame football game. You had the opportunity as a college football player to go to multiple different venues. If you had to pick another venue that you think stands out amongst the rest, what is it, Mike?
You know what? I had a great time, and we were super fortunate. Notre Dame had a home-and-home against Oklahoma that started my fifth-year senior year And so we got to go down and play at Norman. It was a night game. College game day was there. We were both highly ranked at the time. It was Landry Jones and Kenny Stills were the real studs on that offense at that point in time. Bob Stoops had lost like 5 home games in his entire career. The whole place is striped in their colors, fireworks at kickoff and everything. It helps that we went down there and beat them pretty good, but I just remember thinking what a unique game day atmosphere that was. What a great job they did of creating an environment that was hostile. I remember that first third down, having a look at the guys next to me, having a look at Braxton Cave, our center, and ask a couple of times for the snap count on that one and try and make sure we had all that buttoned up for that first blitz package on third down that I might have given up a pressure on. So I thought they did a really good job of that in a place that we didn't get to play but once when I was there, but left a really great impact.
I'm curious, when you hear the words Arkansas football, now this past decade hasn't really been kind, especially the latter half of the decade. Mike, what first pops into your mind when you hear the term Razorback football?
Hog mollies, I think a lot of the remnants of like Brett Bielema and the stuff that like just that ethos of the hog on the side of the helmet, but big, powerful offensive linemen. I think underrated quarterback play too. When you talk about both Allens, I think in that instance, I know that the fan base was pretty critical of them during their time period there, but I thought those were guys that produced probably better than they got credit for there. Certainly had to deal with a lot in their time as quarterbacks there, but Arkansas struggled as of late. That's a program that's trying to really figure out and get its way going forward in a lot of that. So I think from a national perspective, they've got a long way to go in all that one, but they've certainly had great brand recognition purely with the mascot and the size of their linemen going into this one, and I think they would probably be shooting for a little more than that going forward.
Mike, I want to talk to you about offensive line play coming up as we close out, but you bring up the Allen brothers. Brandon got his truck burned down. What is the worst thing that happened to you during your playing days at Notre Dame? Did anyone cause any disruptive behavior to some of your personal item? He got his truck burned down, man.
Yeah, that always stuck out to me as pretty insane in a lot of this for a quarterback that was doing pretty well on a bad team, all things considered. But I never had anything like that. Unfortunately, college football does have that seedy underbelly. I had quarterbacks on our team that got death threats after bad games and stuff like that. At certain times, people forget what we're watching as a game, and no one is going to die based off the outcome. But it does feel like that. But I remember that with the car and everything that went along with it. So hopefully we're past that now. As we turn the page and get ready to start the Sam Pittman era of all this, I'm hopeful that we can, all kind of go along with his general ethos. Sam, just in following and watching the Georgia offensive line in that program for so many years, seems like as good a guy as you're going to find, and certainly someone that is, at the very least from the hog molly perspective that I'm associated with, someone that I think has a pretty good future ahead of him. So let's not light any cars on fire now.
You bring up Sam Pittman. As a former offensive lineman, Sam Pittman is regarded as one of the best in the country, if not the best in the country when it comes to that position group. What takeaways do you have from him with his so many former players moving on to the NFL? And what do you think we can expect from Sam Pittman and the trenches at Arkansas?
Yeah, so I think certainly with any offensive line coach as your head coach, attention to detail is going to be there because the position is such a foreign skill set, right? Everything else in football outside of defensive back play and offensive line play is a natural skill set. We all grew up running, tackling, throwing, doing stuff like that, but backpedaling and blocking and all of the things associated with pass protection are a learned skill. So attention to detail for O-line coaches, especially one the caliber of Sam. You mentioned the job he did churning out pros at Georgia. I always said, even if you're not a former offensive lineman and you want to watch and you see the same things across the board, when you see guys putting their hat and hands in the same spot consistently regardless of position, when the steps look like they're in unison, that always points back to coaching, when you can get 5 guys to buy into what you're telling them. And Sam and those Georgia offensive lines were always such a consistent product, even before you had, first-round talent like you have in the last couple of years with Isaiah Wynn and the tackles that they've put out there. And certainly the interior guys haven't been a slouch either. So I just think what he's been able to build there consistently with technique, which is the hardest thing to do as an offensive line coach, but they're always finishers as that unit. That was always a group that you knew was going to be downfield, diving over piles, trying to finish guys through the echo of the whistle. And when you're coming in and trying to reignite a program, those are the kind of things that get people fired up when you see it put on tape. Those are the kind of things that even as the team struggles in the transition, he's going to be able to point to, the team's going to be able to rally around. And I think having those as the bedrock of a program is usually always a pretty good starting point.
Mike, last question before we let you go, man. Just your overall opinion on what happens with college football this season.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to deal with some of the problems Major League Baseball's dealt with, where you're probably going to see conferences have certain teams that are going to have to forfeit because of a rash of positive tests. You're going to see kind of an inconsistent conference slate. Since everyone's gone conference only, some teams are going to end up playing more games in conference than less based on where their conference lies geographically, where the surrounding spikes are, and based on, honestly, the resources of the schools in question. You know, we've seen plenty of places, like we mentioned, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, and others who have a ton of resources to be able to test their players and staff often, having a good time so far being able to contain that. Getting students back on campus is going to be a wild card, but I think it's going to be choppy and inconsistent. I think they're going to fight like hell to finish it with the spring as the ultimate backup plan, fail-safe emergency. And I think it's going to give us, you know, some version of a finish here, probably a champion that people will dispute if we get to that point. But you're going to have to be willing to kind of stomach a lot of change. All of us are, in the name of seeing if this thing gets off the ground.
Mike Golic Jr., ESPN Radio, new show coming out later this month. Mike, appreciate you making some time for us on the Morning Rush, man.
Nah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.